Welcome in. What's Right with Nick Wright, episode 254. A ton to do today. All sports on today's show. No network or sports media commentary. However, I did do Colin Cowherd's podcast last night, and he, as he often does, baited me after a couple, because Colin and I do these podcasts at night, and we're both having a cocktail. And then he usually about an hour into the podcast, when I think it's about over and I'm, finishing my large glass of wine that I started with, he starts jumping me with political topics. And yesterday I just kind of was in the mood. So if you want to hear my thoughts on the last month in the American presidential race, vice presidential candidates and such, that Cowherd's podcast probably comes out later today. But rather than promote podcasts other than my own, might as well, if I'm doing that, tell you like, rate, subscribe, review. Our YouTube numbers have kind of stalled a bit, probably because we haven't been telling you guys to subscribe to the YouTube channel, but also because it's not football season. Damonza's just got the one sad plaque leaning up against the wall in his apartment because he hasn't yet hung it up. So we try to get some more. Before we get to the show, let's get to what missed. Serbia, USA is not going to make the show because it hasn't happened yet. France, Germany is happening about an hour from now when we're taping and live on YouTube. Serbia, USA. This is the third Team USA basketball game, Damonza, that tips off right when First Things First starts. And I don't get the daily ratings, and I don't really look at the daily ratings unless it's football season. But I've got to imagine it hasn't been good for the show. I bet I could look at just a ratings graph and just without dates and be like, oh, Team USA was playing, Team USA was playing. So not great for us. Rudy Gobert maybe had finger surgery. He didn't, but I don't know. And the Arizona Cardinals introduce a truly grotesque creation, which is a burrito of candy wrapped in cotton candy. It looks truly abhorrent. All right, Damonza, let's get to the actual NFL news if we could.
Yeah, one of the huge stories of this NFL offseason is if Brandon Aiyuk is going to leave the 49ers. Your guy, Andrew Filipponi, is reporting that there's been a verbal agreement between Pittsburgh and San Francisco. So it's all but final. Yep. But would this be a bigger ad for Pittsburgh or a bigger loss for Purdy in San Francisco? Obviously.
Oh, that's an interesting way to put it. I mean, it would be a massive ad for Pittsburgh. If the Steelers get competent quarterback play, they're a legitimate team. Assuming they add Aiyuk. We know the defense is good. They might have the best defensive player in the league in TJ Watt. Last year, they found their way into the playoffs again, thanks to a few really good quarterback games by Mason Rudolph. We know they're going to be well coached. You have some offensive line questions for them, and I think their running back duo is a little overrated. But if George Pickens all of a sudden gets dropped down to your number 2 receiver and Aiyuk's your number 1, then the question just is, can Fields or Russ just give you the 18th best quarterbacking season in football, and that should be enough to contend for a playoff spot and not contend for a Super Bowl, but it would be a great ad for Pittsburgh. To the San Francisco side of things, because I do believe this is a fait accompli, that Brandon Aiyuk is going to end up with the Pittsburgh Steelers, that right now they're haggling over some financial details with Aiyuk while they've hammered out the trade details with San Francisco. That's what Andrew Filipponi is reporting. I've known Andrew for, gosh darn, man, almost 20 years, and no one is more connected to the Steelers than he is. So I trust his information, even though the national insiders are saying, Andrew's saying it's the 1 yard line. The national folks are saying it's closer to the 10-yard line. I trust Andrew. If you're the Niners, this is a debacle. And that is not because they can't compete without Aiyuk. That's not what I'm saying. It's a debacle of process. If you were going to trade Brandon Aiyuk, you've got to do it before the draft when Pittsburgh was offering you a first-round pick that you could have used in this year's draft for a player that can help you this season. The Steelers, by the way, in this year's draft, had the 20th pick, took Troy Fautanu from the tackle from Washington, a player the Niners, I don't know if they would have picked him, but an offensive lineman could have really helped them. When you don't trade Aiyuk before the draft, then you've got to just be willing to hold your water and be like, no, we're not trading him. We're going to, and if we lose him next year for nothing, or if we franchise tag him and work out a trade, then so be it.
Even if the player clearly wants out and
so that's
cancer to the locker room.
So that is exactly the point, Damonza. So that's the smart point, because we talked about this on the show yesterday, which is what leverage does Aiyuk have? And the answer is exactly that. And I think folks underrate that, how big of an impact that can have, because they don't look at football teams like workplaces. But anyone that's ever worked in an office and had someone there that was important, that they couldn't just get rid of, that wasn't afraid they were going to be fired, who every day walked in with a bad attitude, who shit-talked people behind people's backs, who just sucked the energy out of any room they go into, anyone that's experienced that knows that has real impact on other people's ability to do their work, on other people's enjoyment of going to work. And if you're in a team environment, whether it's a literal team like a football team or a regular workplace where you work as a team, that can totally derail you. So that's clearly what the Niners are afraid of. The point I'm making, Damonza, is they needed to determine before the draft, if we don't trade Aiyuk and if we don't give him $30 million a year or whatever the number is that the route he's going to take? And if so, then we've got to trade. And we don't think we can deal with that, then we've got to trade him. And the other reason, Damonza, that I think this is so mishandled is this isn't a shock. This didn't catch any. He has been flirting with Washington and Pittsburgh for months, openly, talking about it on podcasts, putting out IG videos saying, oh, they're done with me, doing a TikTok where he's breaking down the Commanders all 22. Like, this wasn't a, oh my God, who could have seen this coming? Everyone saw it coming. So if you saw it coming, had an opportunity to trade him before the draft, and decided not to all of a sudden, lose your mettle a month before the start of the season is concerning. And I think it's damaging, significantly damaging for the Niners. Let's go on.
And okay. Are we on to the next topic? Or
No. We can do the other stuff on this. Go ahead.
Christian McCaffrey being hurt and them trading Aiyuk away, what do you think San Francisco's future is for this year? Are they cooked?
Well, McCaffrey, they're not cooked, but last year they got outstanding health by all the Avengers, right? Now they're in this situation. Trent Williams is holding out. He's the best player on the team. I think that'll get resolved, but it's not ideal. Christian McCaffrey, who the two healthiest portions of his career have been this time with San Francisco, is dealing with a calf strain before the season starts. That's not ideal. Ricky Pearsall, their first-round pick, has been hurt 3 separate times in camp, and even if none of those are significant injuries, that is a double red flag. The first one is, oh man, did we draft a player that's going to have major medical concerns? And the other one is, rookies need training camp more than anybody. And Aiyuk, who was Purdy's only consistent deep downfield target last year. The reason Purdy wasn't a dink and dunker was because of Brandon Aiyuk. He was 14 yards per attempt to Aiyuk, 6.5 yards per attempt to everyone else on the team. All those things, you put them together, it's a bad offseason. And so that... Go ahead.
Yeah, it also seems like Aiyuk was angling to play with Jaden Daniels, and Washington's GM came from San Francisco. With Washington not being interested in Aiyuk, is there something to read into there?
So what I read into that is that Washington understands that as of this moment, they don't have an NFL, I shouldn't say NFL caliber, but a good enough, even close to good enough offensive line, and they need their draft capital to spend on that in future years. They're not, It's not like Washington this year thinks we're competing for a championship. They have Terry McLaurin, they have Dotson, they have wide receiver is not their glaring need. Offensive line is. And for them to, trade away elite draft resources for what would be a luxury, which is another wide receiver is one of the deeper spots on the Commanders team. That's I understand.
You don't need a wide receiver.
Right. And I think they know that they are going to have to spend a massive amount of draft capital over the next few years building up that offensive line. They signed Tyler Biadasz from Dallas this year. They signed my pal Nick Allegretti from the Chiefs this year. Their starting left tackle right now is a rookie third-round pick. They need the offensive line help. And when you've spent a first-round pick on Dotson 2 years ago and Terry McLaurin's a really good player, it just seems almost like a luxury they can't quite afford. That's how, by the way, sorry for hitting the mic, that's how I read it. Listen, I'm not covering the Commanders on a daily basis, but if I were running the Commanders, I would say this is a luxury we are not, we almost don't deserve yet. We need to build up the rest of our football team first. All right, let's move on.
Fair enough. So Hard Knocks with the Bears and Caleb Williams is officially kicked off. Nick Saban came out and said that high expectations could stunt Caleb's growth. You actually came out and said that Caleb could be in the Super Bowl this year. So do you think that you're contributing to Caleb Williams' potential downfall?
So here's the thing. I think that if it were a trendy consensus pick, I think that might be not great for him. Right now their over-under is set at 8.5. They have the 15th best Super Bowl odds in a 32-team league. There isn't too much hype. And I understand what Saban is saying in that expectations can, that the expectations, if they're too high and you don't live up to them, the damage it can do to you as a young player. Where I think Saban's mistaken is the wrong word. The context I would add to Saban's point is the expectations for Bears fans is the standard is so low. They've never had a 4,000-yard passer. They've never had a 30-touchdown thrower. The all-time franchise leader in passer rating for the Chicago Bears is Mitch Trubisky. The single best quarterback season they ever had was Eric Kramer 30 years ago. Jim Harbaugh was their starting quarterback for 4 years in the 90s and never threw 16 touchdown passes, okay? So Caleb just going out there and being slightly above average is going to put Bears fans and Bears local media over the moon. So, no, I understand Saban's point, but I don't think the expectations are too high. Let's go to the other follow-ups.
So both Caleb and Josh Allen are set to play against each other this weekend. What are you going to be looking out for both of them?
Well, I'm very curious for Caleb. He's going to have opportunities to run and make plays with his legs. I would prefer he doesn't do much of that in the preseason. And for Josh, I'm curious who his theoretical number one target is going to be. There have been pretty good reports out of Bill's training camp about Khalil Shakir. I'm interested in what that looks like. Obviously, everybody loves Keon Coleman. And then there's Curtis Samuel. It's kind of a hodgepodge. Keon Coleman, a first round or second round pick, but rookie. And the other reports are that my guy, two-time Super Bowl champion, MVS, might get cut. Wow. Sneaky reports out of New England and Buffalo are that Juju and MVS, the Chiefs' two top receiving targets the last 2 years, might not make either of those rosters. And it's not like New England and Buffalo have stacked receiver rooms. So that's what I'll be watching for those guys in that game. All right, next.
Is your prediction more about Caleb in Chicago or your lack of faith in the NFC?
It's a both. It's both.
Oh.
I think that you look at the NFC, we're going to get to the Eagles' issues in a moment, but they're well documented and they collapsed last year. The Cowboys have had a miserable offseason. I'm the only person that cares about this, but I do care about it. The Lions lost their kicker for the year, and I think that matters. And that's like a sneaky important injury. There's no one in the NFC South I think is a contender. The Niners are going backwards, not forwards. So that leaves the Rams, who had Aaron Donald retire, and then the Packers. And I just think the Packers, because they were so great in that playoff game, people are slightly overstating how good they were over the course of the whole season. So all of that, plus the fact that I think Caleb's going to be an instant star, is why I'm putting some stock in that. All right, let's go on to Hurts and Sirianni.
So a new report said that Hurts and Sirianni's relationship was fractured last year. So instead of this story dying a little while back when it first came out, it's getting more life. Mm-hmm. So it sounds like there's something really there. Who do you think has more pressure to make amends, Sirianni or Hurts?
Well, listen, I think Sirianni has more pressure to make amends, but I think Jalen Hurts sneakily is under massive pressure this year. And we talked about this on the show yesterday, so follow me on this, Damonza. Here's the point that I'm trying to make. And I understand it's a little counterintuitive. If Nick Sirianni gets fired by the Eagles, his next job is head coach of an NFL team. His winning percentage plus 3 years, 3 playoff appearances, plus a Super Bowl appearance means if he gets fired, he gets another bite at the head coaching apple, almost guaranteed. I know that folks are going to say that I'm getting ahead of myself here. But if the Eagles sour on Jalen Hurts, typically, when a team that drafts you and invests in you decides, oh, you're not the guy, your next job is then a quarterback competition. That's what it was for Darnold. That's what it was for Baker. It wasn't that for Goff, and Goff ended up, by the way, being the best example of this. It's what it was for Carson Wentz. It didn't work well. And I know people are like, my God, they're a pretty quick trigger on Jalen Hurts. The point I'm trying to make is this. If Hurts is mediocre this year, then you're going to look at his 8-year sample of big-time football and say, in college, he didn't look like a franchise quarterback. Early in his career, he didn't look like a franchise quarterback. The last couple years, he didn't look like a franchise quarterback. It was the one season when he damn near won league MVP, when he played a brilliant Super Bowl, and no one can take that away from him. But the more we get away from that in time, until he has another year similar to that, I think there's going to be growing concern. So I think both of these guys are under massive pressure for slightly different reasons. Looks like you have a question, Damonza. So your thought on what I said.
No.
Go ahead.
I understand what you're saying, and I think I'm not sure how long has Sirianni been a head coach?
So 3 years and 3 playoff appearances.
Exactly. And
so
then Hurts has a longer sample size and Sirianni has a shorter one, and it's better. So
well, and listen, and I'm no Sirianni guy, and Hurts doesn't have a much longer sample size because when I say 8 years, I'm including college and him having to transfer from Alabama. But it's just, I think that this is the other place where draft bias works against you. The whole league had an opportunity to take Jalen in round 1. Nobody did, which means there are certain teams, or a lot of teams, theoretically, that looked at him as a certain level prospect. Teams stick with those biases sometimes. It's the same. The flip side of that happens a lot. When a guy who was a top 10 pick is never good, teams keep taking chances on him because they're like, man, we had him graded as the 7th best player in the draft. When we get him, even if he's been in the league 4 years and been cut by 2 teams. And so it's not like Jalen was a 6th round pick, but I just think his footing is less certain than most people tend to believe. And this article did not do him or Sirianni any favors. All right, let's move on to hoops real quick.
All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about Lauri Markkanen, but it's actually about Steph Curry, so just walk with me here. After failing to complete a deal with the Warriors, the Jazz extended Markkanen. Golden State wasn't willing to include pods into any trades. So how should Steph feel about them prioritizing the future instead of the end of his career?
Well, yeah, so I think this is the exact right angle. So I think that the Lauri Markkanen signing is actually a Warriors Steph Curry story. Because it's not just that he signed the extension with Utah, it's when he signed it. So he did what LeBron did a couple years ago, which is sign the extension at a late enough date into the offseason where he's untradeable this year. When you sign an extension in the NBA, you cannot be traded for 6 months. So if you sign an extension or a free agent deal at the beginning of free agency, you can be traded in like January, right? Because of when he signed it, those 6 months expire the day after the trade deadline. So he's untradeable this entire season. That's why it's noteworthy, because the Warriors were in on Markkanen. A lot of people thought they were going to get Markkanen. They didn't. And then people thought, okay, well, maybe they'll get him during the year. Now it's impossible. No one can trade for Lauri Markkanen this season, which means the Warriors, much like the Lakers, didn't get better. The Lakers did nothing. The Warriors, lost Clay and added some, pieces to replace him, but nothing significant. And so I said briefly yesterday on the show, Lauri Markkanen signing his extension when he did made it 1% more likely that Steph and LeBron one day play together. 1%. Because I just think that Steph is going to have another frustrating year. And I think these guys playing on Team USA, man, are like, especially the older guys, Steph, LeBron, and KD, are looking around saying, we're still good enough, guys. And our teams aren't. The Lakers seem just totally fine standing pat because nobody wants to make a big decision, because nobody wants accountability for the decision. The Warriors sneakily are not trying to spend a bunch of money. And now they've spent more money than any team in the league over the last decade, but now they're quietly trying to pare that down. The Suns, on the other hand, are trying to do a lot, but they don't know what they're doing. So those three guys are kind of stuck, and I find it pretty fascinating.
If that was plus
right, what are the
1%, if that was plus 1%, what is the percentage of LeBron and Curry playing together now?
One day in their careers, if I added 1% to it, I'm going to say it's now at 16%.
Okay.
A 1 in 6 shot. It was at 15, now it's at 16. A 1 in 6 shot. So roll a die and see if you can call the number. That's the odds. 1 in 6. That's what I think.
Okay.
What else?
Does Golden State, looking down the road, do you think that has anything to do with Steph kind of lacking in this Olympic run?
No, I don't buy that at all. And no, I don't think that's it. I think it's a money thing. I honestly think it's a money thing. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe again, I'm not a reporter on the ground there. But when the owner comes out and says months ago, our number one goal is to get under the tax, kind of tells you it's a money thing right now for them. Okay. And then what's the last one?
If Vegas offered a bet like Steph to end his career as a Warrior, yes or no, what would the odds look like right now?
Minus 300, yes. Plus 280, no. But that's, it's 1 in 4 about that he doesn't. It's not nothing, guys. That's all I'm saying. It's not nothing. Quick break, right back. What's right? All right, welcome back in. What's right with Nick Wright, Damonza. Let's get to some do's and don'ts of camp fights before we get to our game today.
Yeah, so with joint practices underway across the league, fights are breaking out everywhere. It's not just from team to team, it's even teammates. DK Metcalf tried to pull a Myles Garrett on his teammate yesterday. I think he snatched one of his teammates' helmet off and tried to hit another teammate with it. You're on the record saying that you don't mind camp fights, but you don't want receivers punching helmets. So break it down. Correct. What are some do's and some don'ts?
Well, yeah, listen, the quarterback can never be involved. Daniel Jones, your guy, Damonza, tried to get involved in a camp fight. That's ridiculous. You can't use any weapons, and don't punch helmets. You can slap. You can do a little.
Daniel Jones, my guy anymore. He's not.
What do you mean?
He's my guy a while.
Oh, you're abandoning him?
I know. But yeah.
Okay, fair enough. You can do a Deacon Jones head slap to a helmet. You can do a mush face. There are things but you can't punch helmets. You can't use helmets as weapons, and you can't have your quarterback involved. It's actually, we don't need to spend much time on it. Those are the obvious rules. And if you're a fringe roster guy, don't start a fight with a star on the team. Just don't. It's just bad business. Okay? Like, it's just, I understand wanting to show fight. There's different things. You can maybe bait the star into starting a fight with you, but you can't be the one to start the fight with the star. Everybody knows this. All right, let's play a game.
We're playing Wright-Ins today. First off, we got Chiefs and Andy Reid. Andy Reid said that he's gonna play the starters for the first quarter versus the Jaguars this weekend. Kansas City playing the ones against Jacksonville is.
I mean, here's the thing. I don't understand why more NFL teams don't say, hey, what does Andy Reid do in the preseason and training camp? Yeah, let's go ahead and do that. The team that, aside from last year, starts every year undefeated in September and is more ready than everybody. And even before Mahomes got there, came into the season in great shape doing things. Why don't we do what he does? It's baffling to me more people don't
Aaron
copy
Rodgers
it.
on our team. Can't do that.
I just don't get it. And I understand it's like, well, Sean McVay sat everyone in preseason years ago and they started 8-0. I get that. And I'm not saying it's one size fits all. What I am saying is the Chiefs run one of the toughest training camps in football. They have the best player in the league. He plays in the preseason, and it seems to work. So I just don't understand why more teams don't copy it. That's all. So Andy Reid playing his starters in the preseason is the right move because Andy's the best coach in the league. I just like when for 15 years, Bill Belichick, when he was at the top of his game, you know what he did in the draft? Traded down consistently. Oh, you desperately want the 47th pick? Well, give us 56 and 104 and we'll do it. Oh, you desperately want the 28th pick? Well, give us 35 and 58 and we'll do it. And it worked. I just figure out who the best in the field are and copy what they're doing is a pretty tried and true way to succeed. Go ahead.
So
Next.
Before practice, the Chiefs were asked who the GOAT basketball player was, and LeBron won that debate. But Montrell Washington said Carmelo Anthony was the GOAT. What do you think was going on there?
Carmelo Anthony Edwards got 1 vote. Larry Bird got 1 vote. But the story of this was Kobe got 6, Mike got 7, and LeBron got 17. To which I'll say, you're welcome, America. I mean, if you want to see the impact, my consistent dedication to truth and accuracy in the most important debate in sports, MJ LeBron, the impact it has, well, a team full of kids who never saw Mike play, barely, most of them didn't see much of Kobe either, who happened to be on a team that, my TV show is on quite often in the facility. LeBron won overwhelmingly. So if you have any question about where that alleged debate is headed, I think that was a pretty good indicator. Next.
What do you think the numbers would have been 5 years ago? Would it have been around the same or a lot different?
No.
A lot different, right?
MJ by a huge margin. Look at the numbers after The Last Dance came out. But MJ fired his last propaganda bullet, and it wasn't enough. All right, next.
After calling Stephon Diggs a great player, Josh Allen said, "I don't know if I'd say I miss him." At training camp, between Allen and Diggs, who will miss who more?
All right, so I want to be fair to Josh Allen. That's a truncated version of the quote. He said nice things about Stephon Diggs. But to be honest, I think Diggs will miss Allen more. And here's why. Because I think Diggs can be a lot. And I think he was okay with him moving on. If you're Stephon Diggs, with every year with Josh Allen, you were one of the most targeted receivers in the league. You were clearly, without question, the Bills' #1 receiver. I think there's a good chance that Stephon Diggs is the #3 receiver for Houston. Nico Collins is the #1, and if Tank Dell is healthy, he might be the #2. So I think Diggs is going to miss Josh in that, man, you knew you were getting 12 targets a game. That's probably high. 8 to 10 targets a game, and that's not going to be the case anymore. Next.
During Hard Knocks, the Bears thought it was a good idea to teach their quarterbacks to slide using a slip and slide. Totally logical. The Bears quarterback slip and slide was?
It was one of the only times a slip and slide has looked fun other than in the commercials. I'm really going to pull on the heartstrings of millennials. There are 2 products that growing up in the commercial looked so elite and in practice were a disaster.
Fushigi.
One, I don't know what fushigi is. What's that?
Sorry, no. It was just this. No. It was this ball that they showed on a commercial that looked like it levitated or whatever, and you got it, and it did none of that. But you're probably talking about something that actually works and wasn't like a trick.
No. It was something similar to that. So one was the slip and slide. The slip and slide seemed amazing. In practice, you get it out in the yard. Within minutes, it's just mud everywhere. You try to dive on it, you hurt yourself. There's like rocks and roots under the ground. It rips. Awful. But in the commercials, it looked amazing. I want to see, I don't know if we can show on camera or go to the producer's room because you're too young for the other item. But I bet someone in the room can guess it. The other thing that looked amazing in the commercials, but was just a 10 out of 10 commercials, 1 out of 10 application. It was a board game. It had a lot of bells and whistles, a lot of moving parts, and it really... Mousetrap! Good job, Daniel! That's exactly right! Mousetrap! The Mousetrap commercial, it was like, holy shit. This is going to change every sleepover I have. This is gonna be amazing. And then you get it, and putting it together is a pain in the ass, and none of that cool stuff happens. So, like, those are Mousetrap, Slip and Slide. I'm going to add another one. Oh, what was, again, the producers, the millennials will help me. Hot Wheels. Hot Wheels were fine, but the Hot Wheels tracks that really made it seem like, this thing is going to be self-sufficient.
It's going to work like this.
And cook. It's going to work like this. It's not going to work like this. The Hot Wheel cars were still cool. Sorry, this is a non sequitur. This is, a bit of a tangent, but this is a great. I'm just trying to put in the listener comments other items from your childhood that I'll give you another one, Damonza, and you might be old enough, just old enough to have dealt with this. The wrestling action figures.
Oh, yeah.
So,
yeah.
Yeah. So the wrestling action figures.
Needed those every time we went to Walmart.
Those were a big part of my childhood as well. And maybe by the time you were a kid, they were a little more honest in the commercials. And maybe I was just dumb. But in the commercials, it's like, this guy, you press this button, he does his finishing move on this other guy. But I guess I didn't put together, like, in order for that to work, it's going to take a couple minutes of, like, real, finagling of getting them in the right spot and all of it. Those commercials were elite, but Slip and Slide and Mousetrap were the two biggest fell for the banana in the tailpipe of what you thought it was going to be and then what it ultimately was. To answer the question, the Bears slip and slide I thought was actually smart. I think teaching quarterbacks how to slide is smart, and if they don't know how, we've all seen it when a guy tries to slide and his foot gets caught in the turf or something and it looks bad. So I actually think that was smart. All right, we can keep going.
Katie's legacy is one of the strangest in sports. To add to it, he just passed Lisa Leslie to become the all-time leader in Team USA basketball points. The first line of Katie's legacy will be
one of the most talented players in NBA history and one of the most gifted scorers who oddly didn't quite have the team success you would have expected for a player of his caliber, but also is, I said this to Colin last night, Brew has said something similar. If you think of the 20 greatest players in league history, okay, of all of them, Durant might be the number one pick as far as can literally drop him on any other great team in any other era, and it just makes everyone better. Nobody has to take a back seat. Nobody has to change their role. All the other, you drop Magic on a great LeBron team, and LeBron's got to adjust. You drop Michael on any of Kobe's teams, and Kobe's got to adjust. You drop Shaq on an Akeem team, and obviously, or vice versa. Think of any great team in NBA history, and just be like, we're dropping Kevin Durant on it. It's like, oh, that works perfectly. And all their other stars can still be stars, and he's just going to take over for their worst starter at basically any spot and be great. And that's why when you dropped him on the Warriors, they became one of, if not the greatest team ever. You drop him on Team USA in any environment, and he looks like one of, if not the best guy out there. All right, so let's go to the next one, please.
So Justin Fields is starting for the Steelers this weekend as Russell Wilson deals with his calf injury. Will he take advantage of this opportunity? The Steelers' QB1 this season will be.
I think Fields will start more games than Russ. Gary Dulac from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, I think is where he is, tweeted or reported yesterday that Russ is definitively the week 1 starter. I'm not there. That's a hell of a report. That seems a little premature, but it does seem like Russ is the likely week 1 starter. But I think that Fields will start more games this year than Russell Wilson. And I'm told we found Damonza officially abandoning Daniel Jones. I've abandoned. Damonza won't get that reference. That's from
that movie.
I think it's the greatest movie ever made. I think that is my number with respect to the Godfather 1 and 2. Daniel Plainview, who's played by Daniel Day-Lewis, is oil man at the turn of the 20th century, so late 1800s, early 1900s, and he becomes one of the richest, most powerful, successful people in the world while being just an absolutely brutal person and not good father. And in lockstep with it, there is that guy, Paul Dano, who is a immoral preacher who is trying to take advantage of the situation as well. That is the very
I feel like
kind
I've seen
of
you watch that movie before or something.
Yeah,
for some reason.
Definitely. I probably watched it 10 times. I think it's the best movie ever made. So that's a good Photoshop. All right, we'll do some listener questions next. What's right? Welcome back in. What's right with Nick Wright, Damonza? Let's do some listener questions.
Shane Stutter, best restaurant to visit while in KC for my friend's wedding this September. His wedding is the day after Kansas City versus Balt. So if you're in town, or Kansas City versus Baltimore. So if you're in town, I'd like to invite you to his wedding. Jesus.
All right. Well, I don't think you can invite someone to someone else's wedding, but I appreciate it. I don't think I'm going to be in town, sadly. Listen for amazing pan-fried chicken and amazing giant fried shrimp and the best chicken noodle soup you've ever had, Stroud's. The Stroud's was a place I used to make them on. I don't know if you liked it or not, but your mom didn't like it, so you and I would go a lot. There's also
their fried chicken's different. There's a different type of cadence to theirs.
Well, because
it's good.
Because it's not. Well, that's why it's pan fried instead of being deep fried. So deep fried, you dip the whole thing in grease. Pan fried, it's in a pan with grease, and you do it like that. So it is very different, and I love it. There was also, do you mind, Damonza, if I tell this? I don't even know if you remember. If I tell the story about when you and I were going to Stroud's and we got pulled over by the cop, do you remember this? You might have memory hold this.
What is it? What is it?
Damonza was like 12, and so if Damonza was 12, I'm 26, 27. And we're driving to Stroud's late on a Sunday. And right before we pull up, I get pulled over for speeding on Shawnee Mission Parkway. And the cop came over and was nice, but inquisitive. Where are you guys going? What are you doing? I'm like, oh, I'm just taking my son to dinner. And again, me 26, Damonza 12. And I'm not going to explain in that moment, I said I'm taking my son to dinner. And the cop didn't believe me, but also didn't want to be, he was actually being nice, but I think was concerned about this child's welfare. And it's so funny you don't remember it. He then came back to the car and asked me, he was like, hey, do you mind stepping out of the car for a moment? And I was like, yeah. And I don't think you knew anything weird was going on. Yeah. So I step out of the car. I step out of the car and I see him walk over to your window and say 2 words to you or 10 words to you. Then he gives me my ticket and he's like, all right, you're good. And when I asked you, and I was like, what was that? And he was like, he just asked me what we were doing. I told him we were going to dinner. I'm like, oh, okay. So then you and I go to dinner at Stroud's. And at the end of the meal, I asked for the check. And the waiter comes over and says, now you remember.
Yeah, I remember that.
The waiter comes over and says, really weird, this cop came in and paid for your meal, but asked us not to say anything to you. So this, this officer was skeptical and I think a little concerned about, this Damonza, this kid's welfare, and then saw that we were being honest and not just we were being honest, but that everything was fine. And I think felt bad about it and paid for our meal. So I remember that vividly, that whole thing. And I almost wish there was something. I never saw that cop again, obviously, or whatever. And I have a lot of criticisms of policing in America and stuff like that. But I thought every single thing that officer did, aside from paying for the meal, which is obviously right, exactly right. The paying for the meal is above and beyond it, but I thought he handled all of it right. He had a funny feeling, but he also didn't want to, overreact to it. But he also didn't like the idea of just leaving it be.
Leaving it alone.
So he went above and beyond. Yeah. So Stroud's for that. For barbecue. Stroud over Mahomes. Is that what I heard? Yeah. For barbecue, for sit-down barbecue, Jack Stack. For more kind of hole-in-the-wall or authentic barbecue, every place is great. People love Kansas City or Joe's Kansas City. I'm an Arthur Bryant's guy. Obviously, Gates is super famous. And for fancy, the place that my wife and I got engaged, Piropo's, the lamb chops and the pork chops at Piropo's are elite, elite, elite. And for good kind of sweet Southern Italian, Anthony's on Grand. Those would be my recommendations. All right, next.
Sean just kills. Nick, if you were approached by Celebrity Jeopardy to compete against Bomani, Mina, and Pablo, do you think you're walking out on top?
Oh, wow. So
Pablo
the favorite in that, yeah. So Pablo went to Harvard, Mina went to Yale, Bomani went to college at 16 and got a master's from North Carolina around the age of 20. If I'm being honest, the favorite in that is Bomani, I think. Because Bomani has such a random assortment of knowledge and facts. I obviously would mop the floor with my two rivals, Mina and Pablo. I mean, that's obvious. But I do think Bomani's the favorite. Next.
Kane Templar, do you think LeBron, KD, and Steph should run it back in 4 years to secure gold in 3v3 basketball?
So evidently the rules of 3-on-3 basketball are weird. Like, as far as if you're allowed to play. Like, FIBA has it set up to where you have to play in a lot of these 3-on-3 qualifiers and get points. And that's why we can't just send our best players. Like, you have to be, like, on the 3-on-3
There's a vetting
circuit.
process.
Yeah, and so I obviously, yes, I think that we could dominate that if we sent NBA guys. But they don't want us doing that. They want you to be like a real 3-on-3 team. Next.
Curtis Matthews, is Jalen Hurts just another Carson Wentz? Never really that good, just average, but has one season that he looks awesome. Like Wentz has had his moment in 2017, in the 2017 season before injury.
So, that to me, it's way too early to say that, but that is the comp of concern. That now, Wentz was second pick of the draft, was from a small school, where a guy for a full year plays at an MVP level, but is never able to capture anything like that again and didn't look like that before. That is the concern. So I'm not ready to say that, but you can't dismiss it as a possibility. Next.
Dr. Turk Nerf guns were always... Dr. Turf, okay.
Dr.
Nerf guns were always overrated, to be honest. Super Soakers, too. Hey, I loved both of those.
So, yeah, we were big Nerf gun. We still have. In our basement, in like a big plastic toy chest, we still have all of Damonza's Nerf guns. We were a big Nerf gun family. The Nerf gun thing is you just can't be cheap on bullet acquisition.
Yeah.
You just have to be fine with, even if this thing only shoots 6, I'm going to have 300 of them. Because what can ruin a Nerf gun war is like, oh, I got to go pick up these bullets and you just got to have a bunch of them.
There is a video out there on YouTube somewhere of me brandishing all my Nerf guns collection. Like I was probably like 12, 13 years old. Yeah, 100%.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny.
I was in love with them.
All right. Go ahead.
Raw on Desk, Power Wheels waiting 12 hours for 30 minutes of play. I don't know what Power Wheels are.
So Power Wheels, that's what I was riding when I was like 5 or 6, and my sister pushed me off the back and I snapped my collarbone. So Power Wheels, Damonza, are the little cars that you see little kids driving around on the sidewalk.
Oh, okay. I guess I just never knew what they were called. Okay.
Yeah. So yeah. I mean, I think those were awesome.
So I think they just died fast, apparently.
I guess I don't have a recollection of that, but that makes sense. You can only charge the battery for so long.
Right.
So the Danny Tanner says the Easy Bake Oven. I buy that, but I didn't have one. Moon Sand, I don't know what that is. Anything slime related, I totally agree. And Diora had a massive slime phase, and Deanna's in the midst of it right now. Of still wanting to do slime. I hate it. All right, do LJ from H-Town.
LJ from H-Town says, "Hey Nick, do you think Mahomes will break Brady consecutive AFC Championship games, 8 consecutive from 2011 to 2018?"
I mean, listen, he's at 6, so it can't be dismissed. I would have told you 5 years ago that streak is more unbreakable than 7 Super Bowls is. 8 years straight making the Final Four is wild. What works against Mahomes on that is the fact that the NFL changed it to where instead of 2 buys, there's only 1. So Brady almost every year was the 1 or the 2 seed. So to make the AFC title game, you just had to win one home playoff game and you're there. Since they switched it to only one bye, it now most years, even if you're 13-4, you might end up having to win 2 playoff games. So that makes it harder. But I mean, Mahomes' worst year of his career is losing in overtime in the AFC title game. So right now, it feels like a good bet he'll break it. But man, that's so hard.
It's tough.
It's so hard to just to every single year be a game from the Super Bowl or closer. All right, last one.
Malik, is there any position on an NFL roster that you feel like is underrated or doesn't get the attention that it deserves?
Yeah, punter. I would be a guy that spends draft picks on my special teamers. I think that if you truly can have a super elite punter, it is a real weapon. And I think they're underpaid and undervalued. Everyone knows kicker is super, is super important because people think about it. But the ability to consistently pin a team back and affect how they call offense is, I think, an underrated thing in the NFL. All right, this was a fun show. We got shows next week, and then we're on vacation for a week. So I'll see you guys. Listen, try to watch some of the TV show today. I know USA Serbia's on, but check it out occasionally. We'd appreciate it. Thanks, Damonza. Appreciate you. See you guys next week. What's right? Hey, thanks for watching. If you're still here, do me a favor. Hit the subscribe button, then hit the bell so you can be notified when we have new episodes. After you've done that, one more favor. Go to your favorite audio platform of choice and subscribe there as well. Don't forget, we're live every Tuesday and Thursday, 10:30 a.m. Eastern-ish. 10:35, 10:40, it sometimes changes, but that's why you hit the bell. You hit the bell so you're notified. You subscribe so we can get to 200,000 followers. We're right around 150,000. We'd love to get to 200,000, get Damonza another plaque. So like, subscribe, rate, send a rating too. Do all that cool stuff. Thanks, guys.